It's been like a rough couple of like a week or so, like I'll admit. So I am actually going to unplug this weekend and I am going to turn on some like happy Halloween like movies and stuff. I still have an old VCR and I'm going to fire up some of those old Halloween tapes with like Donald Duck and stuff. And I'm going to decorate. I'm going to decorate for Halloween, and all of my Halloween decorations, like none of them are gruesome. They're like all cartoony. They're like super happy ghosts and like happy pumpkins and like black cats and stuff. So I need some unplugged time. Isaac, what are you planning on doing this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, I have this. I've had my friend gave me this flagpole, an Alberta flag, to put up on my house like a month
Nice.
ago, let's say. I haven't got around to that for a few reasons. One, I've just forgotten, but two, with the whole Alberta separation movement and where I live, I'm scared genuinely that someone might like egg my house. I don't know. Think about how insane that is, by the way, Kris, for putting up an Alberta flag. Like, there are crazy people out there that see that as some sort of extremely bad thing. An Alberta flag, we're talking about a provincial flag. Like, people see that as we remember the Safeway that took it down. I mean, it's ridiculous that this is what it's come to.
Yeah, if I can give you any motherly advice, it would be don't cave to the crazy. And I have an Alberta flag in front of our house, and so far, no eggs. And even if there are eggs, the magpies will eat them. Like, honestly, the Alberta flag's a nice thing. And also, my favorite color has always been that blue. Walid, I see that you have an Alberta flag behind you already. What are your plans for this weekend? Do you need to unplug a little bit too?
Absolutely, actually. My plan for the weekend was actually just volunteering some of my time to coach some soccer at the local club nearby where I
Nice.
live in the east end of Ottawa. Simply because I love dealing with youth, I love dealing with young people. We're towards the closing end of the warm weather, so I'm assuming sometime around October next month we'll see some more wind, colder days, colder nights. So as much as we can enjoy the outdoors, I'll try to extend that period for as much as I can, and of course try to log off the weekend as well, because I mean, during the day and even beyond the working hours, we're always on social media as journalists, and of course we're always not only contributing to the discussion, but we're also observing and embracing what's going on so that we can share with our viewers. So I appreciate that job. I love it so much, and sometimes I do it on the weekends, but I think for this weekend I might try to tone it down a little bit, just for the sake of, again, touching some grass, enjoying some fresh air, and hopefully keeping my mindset as positive as can, given light of recent news around the world, frankly.
All right, so let's all look forward to touching grass. But first, we need to stick our heads back into this matrix. So let's get things started. Welcome to Off the Record, which is actually on the record here with the True North Wire. My name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, sitting in to kind of shepherd the conversation today with two of my good friends, Isaac and Walid. Isaac, you're here in Alberta. You're in the capital there in Edmonton. And Walid, you said you're in the east end of Ottawa. Are you in Orleans or whereabouts?
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. One of my favorite parks is out that way, and my husband's gym was out that way. I love Orleans. All right, we have to get into some topics here that are kind of tough, and so we're going to be dealing with things like freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Touching on this, because of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we were fighting against things like C11, which was the big, clampdown on what you can hear, say, and see on the internet, and that was being funneled through the CRTC. Because the thinking goes like this. If you can't express yourself freely, you can't hold government to account. And at the end of things with the Taxpayers Federation, that means that they can tax you all they want. They can ban vehicles all they want. You can't actually speak out against it. So freedom of expression is fundamental, which is why I wanted both of your thoughts, Isaac and Walid, on what's going on in the States right now. In the wake of the assassination, obviously, of Charlie Kirk, now we're seeing some clampdowns happening through government regulators on shows. I wanted just to throw this out to you guys. I actually don't know what to think about it. It's also happening in the States, so I'm trying my best to stick to my knitting and write about the BC budget. What do you guys think about this?
Yeah, Kris, it's such a tough topic because let's just say broadly, right-wing pundits have been generally, I'd say, against cancel culture, especially because we've seen that specifically in regard to anyone speaking out against LGBTQ and the movement, or the Pride movement, or Pride indoctrination, even in schools, etc. And that's kind of where I think Canada's cancel culture has been focused. Now we're seeing people in the States like Jimmy Kimmel there get fired for saying just obscene things about Charlie Kirk after he was assassinated, which of course, as an immediate reaction, you're going to think is a good thing. But then it's like, well, am I now supporting cancel culture, the thing I've been fighting against for so many years? So it's a really weird conundrum that we will find ourselves in.
Walid?
In terms of cancel culture, I mean, the honest truth is that you will not have the same formula for both sides in terms of what convinces people to want to cancel someone in the first place. You know, you can get to the same results between Pam Bondi and previous attorney generals or previous, figureheads in the White House. You can get to the same level of let's say, a push for censorship or cancellation from the government onto the private sector or on the private sector on itself. But the formula might be different. The issue or the topic might be, for the left, obviously social issues and the nature of the LGBTQ movement and other, race-based identity politics are probably the more sensitive issues where the campaign for cancellation is strongest. On the right, that can include religion, that can include any affair that happens to be sensitive to conservative voters and voices. So I think that as much as I'll just tell you the truth, I don't watch Jimmy Kimmel. I don't really watch late night television, especially since 2016-17. Like I liked some of it, frankly. I liked some of the guests that they used to bring over and the funny shows they used to have, but frankly, it just became an anti-Trump daily rant show for most of it, really. And that kind of became a little bit too repetitive for my liking. So, but besides that, I mean, I think it's up to viewers to see whether or not, hosts should, continue in their spot or not. I think really the public and the marketplace should be the ones to decide best. Now, in this case, I'm sure that this company fired him because of some backlash, but I'm sure there's some top-down influence from even government in this case, and that concerns me for sure. So I'm not a fan of cancel culture regardless. Obviously, what he says about the Kirk assassination was obscene, but there are many people saying many obscene things on television all the time, on social media, and all kinds of areas of society. So I think the rules are best left consistent, and that's for us as free speech advocates and those that practice free speech as journalists on a day-to-day basis. I think it's important for us to remain consistent.
I will point out that here in Canada, there's been different iterations of the attempt to, what I would say, monitor and modify what people can see, hear, and share online. Like I mentioned, Bill C-11. There's currently, people are talking about the so-called online harms bill coming back somehow, some way in the House of Commons. And the reason why the Taxpayers Federation is at least keeping an eye on that stuff is because, to your point, Walid, when you get government involved, that's when things start getting interesting. So I'll just give you a very simple example. It's from a fiscal standpoint. A few years ago, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we found the Trudeau government, they had a study that was within their own department, It was within the Department of Environment, That's when Stephen Guilbeault was the minister. And we found them at least considering / recommending in this study introducing a tax on SUVs and trucks. Now, why am I talking about this in the context of free speech? Well, because folks might remember back when we were fighting things like the carbon tax, that we would have mainstream commentators quite often calling us deniers, like climate deniers, which is a disgusting term. Because I wanted to get rid of the carbon tax, I've literally been called a fascist. Like, it's the weirdest language, Now, coming from some rando online, it didn't really matter. However, the minister took issue with us pointing out, hey, you guys are thinking at least about a pickup truck tax or an SUV tax because of climate, blah, blah, blah. He got so mad that he went online and started calling that misinformation and disinformation, which it was not, because we had the quotes, So this is where I'm very careful when it comes to what the government should be regulating that we can say, especially as an advocacy organization that pushes for lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government. Sometimes we do stuff to get the government's attention, like hand them big golden pig statues to mock them, That may not be nice, that might hurt their feelings. but that needs to be okay. Or otherwise, we're not going to be having this conversation anymore. So that's where I don't know what to think. Plus, it's in the States. However, it does influence us. So it's one of those things I'm at least keeping an eye on. I wanted to kind of sort of shift gears here and move over to what's happening. I actually didn't catch this because it wasn't in regards to budgets and stuff. What's happening at the University of Alberta? There was a professor there, Isaac, that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, Kris, before I get into that, I just want to say one thing, because you, of course, brought up the carbon tax. And I just wanted to, I guess, put on the record that, the Liberals, they just moved the goalpost completely. And it's gaslighting, in my opinion. For example, before they're saying, oh, the carbon tax is the best thing ever. It saves eight out of 10 families money. And now they're in the House of Commons saying the exact opposite. We're the best government ever. We took off the carbon tax. We're saving you money. Well, how can these? It's a paradox, obviously. So whatever. Facts are
because it benefits them. That's why, because it's politics.
Facts are irrelevant to the Liberals when it comes to fiscal ledgers. Anyways, as for the University of Alberta, yeah, Kris. So essentially, an email circulated online from the University of Alberta's Faculty of Law saying they put a professor on leave. So I reached out to them and I said, hey, can you tell me who this professor is? But of course, they said, due to privacy and safety concerns, they could not identify the faculty member. But luckily, some online researchers on X they hypothesized, let's say, that it was this Florence Ashley professor for what he was saying on Blue Sky, of all places. So when I was writing this article, I had to do some research on Blue Sky, which was I was skeptical to be on that website. But anyways, this person, Florence Ashley, who's like a transgender law advocate professor, what he did was he captioned a post. This was from Ezra Klein's opinion piece, which was called "Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way." And the quote from Ashley for the caption said, quote, "You do not, in fact, ever have to hand it to the Nazis. I utterly do not care for any virtues that someone may perceive in them." So he didn't go as far as calling Kirk a Nazi per se, but definitely an inference there. And I mean, I looked on this guy's website, some crazy stuff. Like he was celebrating writing a book, which I can't even say here because there's a swear in it, but gender/effing, the pleasures and politics of living in a gendered body. I mean, this guy's completely radicalized, let's say, when it comes to transgender ideology. And, something interesting I want to highlight too is I was on his Blue Sky there, analyzing all the posts, and one of them said, quote, "Why do I feel," and this guy was ahead of his time, he said, "Why do I feel like they'll somehow find a way to blame Charlie Kirk's shooting on trans people?" This was, of course, before the news came out that Tyler Robinson, the accused assassin of Charlie Kirk, was not only living with and dating someone who was transitioning, and he was completely captured by the ideology in these Discord rooms, and absolutely. So his question, Ashley's, did kind of get answered there. But yeah, that's kind of what went on at the U of A. So we think it's Florence Ashley, but certainly can't say for certain because, the Faculty of Law didn't want to give us that certainty. But yeah, that's pretty much what happened at U of A.
This is also troubling. Walid, you caught up with Member of Parliament Melissa Lantsman. And again, it's all kind of in this same vein. And again, sorry to sound like everyone's mom here, but I think people need some time out. Like, people need some calm. 3 questions I always ask myself before I say something, or at least try to, is, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said right now? And does this need to be said right now and by me? If the answer to all 3 is yes, proceed with caution, compassion, and tact. So it was advice I read many years ago, and I would just dispense that liberally to everybody. Walid, you caught up with Melissa Lantsman, Member of Parliament, and she had some things to say in regards to, again, something going on at the CBC. I'm focused on the Fiscal, so I didn't see what happened over there. What was going on? You're there in Ottawa, and you actually got a clip from her. What was going on?
Yeah, so a few days ago there was this was on the French-speaking part of the CBC, Radio Canada, and there was a journalist that was on the air who said that essentially the reason why the United States is so attached to Israel, in her view, was that Jews have control over banking, financial industries, Hollywood, media, etc. So essentially, they wield enough social and political power and financial power to then bring the U.S. government against perhaps public interest, and that was kind of the argument there. Obviously, it invokes a very consistent and very common, Jewish conspiracy theory about wielding power over society and over people, and that kind of obviously it invokes a lot of possible hatred, especially when you're looking at the fact that in Canada you already have this issue with certain groups calling for measures because they're witnessing the rise of anti-Semitism, whether it be happening on marches or happening online on social media. But my curiosity is this. I spoke to Landsman. She's also the deputy leader of the party, Conservative Party today. And of course, I'm very curious to know exactly where they're set on the CBC issue, because I remember, Pierre was always about defund the CBC. I'm not sure if he's still there. I'm not sure if they're looking to return or advise a change in policy. But Landsman essentially told me that she believes that journalist should be fired, in fact, by the CBC. For now, the individual in question has been suspended, I guess, on pay, pending a review and investigation, any other process that the CBC will apply to this situation. But for now, I believe the individual remains an employee, and so basically she called on that person to be fired. I also caught up with Scott Aitchison actually the same day, yesterday, spoke to him about housing, and actually was just on the air a few minutes before I spoke to him on the CBC. So I asked him, and he said simply, we're dealing with a lot of hate right now in society. He mentioned anti-Semitism specifically because the question was about that, but he just said, there has to be, coexistence and social cohesion. And that's kind of my view, really. I mean, the main concern I would have, beyond just the CBC fiscal issue, which concern I already share with you, Kris, very much so, because I think $1.4 billion for, that kind of immediate investment is a really poor return, financially speaking. But anyhow, my view is that, anyone that does something to engulf, sectarian tensions within our country, within our society, to try to divide us on ethnic lines, I think is doing a disservice and harm to the Canadian project, which is one of, some level of diversity, you can say. I think Landsman also spoke about this herself, that frankly that the Liberals have, invited this situation to be much more common with the rise of anti-Semitism, because this is a group of politicians that she said are speaking out of both sides of their mouth, saying one thing to one community and one thing to another. And this was something that was very interesting, because a few days before I spoke to Landsman, so on Monday, the first day of the fall session of Parliament, I spoke to an MP, Salma. I can't remember her last name, but she's from an ethnic community herself, and she's perhaps one of the more pro-Palestine people in the Liberal caucus. I spoke to her about her thoughts. She described the situation in Gaza as a genocide, as she described the fact that she believes that starvation is being used as a weapon of war, and she made accusations of war crimes against Israel. Then that's her opinion. Now, if you ask, for example, someone like Anthony Housefather, you have a very different opinion. So it seems like the Liberals are almost equipped, based on their model of diversity, to bring about two completely opposite views and somehow build a caucus around each other. And what makes me very curious, personally, Kris, and maybe Isaac, you can speak about this yourself, is the fact that you have a Liberal Party that is ready to unite on their policy on the economy, their policy on, 10, 20 different issues. But this is the issue where you see such a wide divide between current members, former members, members within the caucus of two different seats in the same area, frankly, sometimes. It's very interesting stuff. So I've been following the issue very close in Ottawa, and I look forward to seeing what else other voices have to say, because frankly, with the upcoming recognition of the state of Palestine, this issue is not going anywhere in Canada, at least in our domestic discourse, frankly.
So again, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we focus on lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. There's a lot going on there in what you both just said. As a former journalist and as someone who wants free expression and lower taxes so that we have more freedom, I think a good place to start is to defund the media. So as a baseline, exactly $0 should be going from the government to any media organization. That includes the CBC, which, to your point, Walid, is getting $1.4 billion this year. Put another way, that could otherwise pay the full-time salaries of about 7,000 paramedics plus about 7,000 police officers. That's just the CBC. It is an astonishing waste of money. Further, the CBC now is not the only government organization which is on, media organization, Freudian slip, which is on government payroll. Okay. Much of the mainstream media is now in some way, shape, or form on government payroll. Blacklock's Reporter, which is a completely independent investigative journalism website that does amazing work, has done the math. And it works out to about $29,000 per media employee. So at the baseline, this is our new bumper sticker. Like, we need to defund the media. We need to stop government-funded media. And that way, I think some form of calm and trust can start being rebuilt. Because right now, the latest barometer on trust, it was a study I was reading, it's about 62% of Canadians now believe that what journalists are saying is actively trying to mislead them with statements they know to be false. That's grim. That's a serious problem. Because that is how journalists build rapport with their audiences. They are supposed to be reporting facts. They should be asking W5 type questions: who, what, when, where, why, when, all of that good stuff. And so again, I feel like the frog that's jumping out of the boiling water right now. And like, it's a bit too much. I wanted to move to what I think most people can feel comfortable focusing on. And that is energy and the cost of living. I will say off the top that former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is now leaving as the minister within Prime Minister Mark Carney's cabinet. With all the accolades that I'm hearing coming from the media, largely in the parliamentary press gallery, I need to point out some monetary facts here. Chrystia Freeland was observably a terrible finance minister. Awful. She never once balanced the budget, not even one time. She oversaw some of the worst fiscal decisions of any government starting in 2020. So before folks are saying, oh, she wasn't great. Like, you may like her as a person, by all means, like, that's fine, fill your boots, or like her as a communicator. Again, that's up to you. That's a personal choice. But looking at the cold, hard numbers in the budget, she was a terrible finance minister. And she was part of the cabinet under the Trudeau government, which doubled the federal debt. Doubled it, which is one of the reasons why we have a major crisis going on here. It was because that government printed money like it was going out of style while locking down industry, the two things that happened at the same time, that helped cause the inflation problem that we're grappling with right now. And she helped oversee a lot of that. So straight up, terrible finance minister. I hope she makes a much better ambassador. I wanted to shift to energy. Where were we on that? Isaac, was that your piece that you wrote for True North?
Yeah, Kris. So a bunch of energy leaders, and that's an understatement. I mean, the biggest energy companies in the country wrote to Prime Minister Mark Carney saying that his government needs to change its ways and cut red tape or miss out on what they call the generational opportunity. And it's funny, a lot of the verbiage, the wording in this letter, you might have think that Pierre wrote it himself because they're saying the same stuff he's been saying for so long. But yeah, so it was 92 signatories on the letter. That was 37 CEOs of major oil and gas producers and pipeline companies, 50 leaders from small producers, and yeah, pretty much. But just to list some of the energy behemoths we're talking about: Suncor, Enbridge, Canadian Natural Resources Limited, Imperial Oil, Cenovus, TC Energy. Like, obviously, these are the biggest energy companies in the country. And so they reminded Carney first and foremost about the letter they sent him 6 months ago. I think at the time they were calling for the Liberals to declare an energy crisis. And then they sent him another letter shortly after the election. But briefly, they basically said in this new letter, look, we've sent these letters, but the subsequent actions from your government has not helped in any way, shape, or form. Here's one quote. They said, Canada still lacks the clear, competitive, and durable fiscal and regulatory policies required to achieve the so-called grand bargain. That bargain being significant emissions and reductions, expanded market access, and material upstream production growth. So yeah, no, they did all the things that so many leaders have been calling for so long: repeal the Federal Impact Assessment Act, lift the West Coast tanker ban, eliminate the unlegislated emissions cap, aka production cap, and repeal the carbon levy, the industrial one. So yeah, I mean, and they, again, going back to how they were using Poilievre's verbiage, they said Carney needs to reduce red tape, that being regulatory barricades that make these projects, before you even get a shovel in the ground, it takes years going through bureaucracy and whatnot. So, I mean, Carney's announcing all these things. It's like, okay, in the next decade, we might actually see something. But another recurring theme, let's call it, is Alberta Premier, that we're so lucky to have, Kris. Danielle Smith was all over this, unsurprisingly. She, of course, backed the letter and called on Ottawa to remove restrictive policies. But even more so, about 2 weeks before this letter was sent, Smith essentially just asked for all the same things. She because this was when Parliament resumed, she called on Parliament to immediately scrap the oil and gas production cap, overhaul the No New Pipelines Act, and eliminate the tanker ban. And here's a quick quote from Smith: "The national economic self-sabotage has to stop. Canadians deserve leaders in Ottawa with the courage to unleash our full potential, restore prosperity, and make our country strong again." So Smith was all over this before the leaders even were. But yeah, we'll see, because that 6-month deadline she gave Carney on those 9 demands is coming to a close here. So we'll see what happens when that date strikes.
Willie, did you want to jump in here before I go crazy on it?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so Isaac, you said it very well there. Good job reporting on this. I fundamentally think that this really matters to people. I'm not saying the other stuff doesn't matter, but honestly, for people's mental health, I'm really encouraging people to try to focus on pocketbook issues right now. Like, really think about what matters to average people in your neighborhood and something we can all agree on. So I think most people can agree on things like the government is taking too much of our money. Our cost of living is way too high. How do we fix that? Okay. One of these elements of this is exactly what Isaac was just talking about, and it's what a lot of those energy companies were talking about. And it's this: if we do not get our natural resources out of the ground, properly developed, and out to market, we are all going to suffer economically. We are suffering economically right now. I'll give you an example, okay? Since I did the math, since 2015, okay, since the Trudeau government came into power, okay, was elected into power by the people of Canada, since that date, Canada has roughly lost out on around $600 billion, okay, in natural resources, meaning the revenue that would have been generated, the income taxes that would have been, all of that stuff, the money that would have occurred because of natural resources, between strangled projects that have been stopped, projects that have been dragged on, basically the slow erosion of these natural resource projects. Economists, not us, economists are showing that cost Canada around $600 billion. Add on top of the fact the energy cap that Isaac just mentioned. Now, the pointy heads in Ottawa call it an emissions cap, but those who understand how we get stuff out of the ground say this is a production cap. Add on the production cap cost, including what the parliamentary budget officer said, that this is going to blow, I think it was a $20 billion hole in the economy. Just that one rule, okay? You add all of that stuff together, so that 600 billion plus what the PBO was saying, that is the equivalent of the federal income tax bills of the entire populations of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba for 10 years. Imagine if you're one of those folks, and this is men, women, and children. It's not taxpayers. I just did the easy math with populations, okay? Imagine if you're sitting there working your backside off in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, not having to pay federal income tax for 10 years. That is what is being done to Canada right now. And so I will give credit where it's due. Hearing the language change from Carney while he was in Europe was super important, okay? That was really important. It was no longer language that was coming from Trudeau, who is obviously economically illiterate, okay, who was saying there's no business case for natural gas. Yes, there is. So Carney wasn't saying that when he was in Europe. and neither were some of his people that were there. That's good. But this is the big one. It needs to change. So they can't just say the government is going to build this stuff. We can't. We have unmoney. We are way too deep in debt to even think about doing stuff like this. This has got to be private investment that feels comfortable and safe, leaving their wallet on our park bench. Okay? Because right now they don't. They think it's going to be gone in a millisecond. Okay? Because of things like you just said, Isaac, C-69, the so-called No More Pipelines law, the tanker ban, all right? All of this chilling effect that has happened. What company in their right mind would put their hard-earned investment money into Canada unless they change these things? So the language is great coming from Carney. What needs to happen, though, is regulatory change. They can't just say that the government will do it. The government will build like a pipeline, or the government will build like, a port station. No, we taxpayers are broke. We do not have the money to do this. And so that is where I wanted to end with the cost of living. Who had this article? I'm not sure who wrote it for True North, pointing out again, and I will stress this, all of the stuff that you folks were talking about off the top and all of that, which I'm not denying, okay, is personally meaningful to people. I understand. But interestingly, I find that ultimately people are still worried about the cost of living, that is really their number one issue. And yet Trump and the tariffs and stuff seems to be fading into the background, Isaac.
Yeah, I mean, look, Carney won the elections single-handedly focusing on Trump. And it's nice you were just talking about this, Kris, like Carney's saying all the right things, but look, talk is cheap, and we know that Parliament has been prorogued for months now. It's just returned. So it's like, okay, the time for talking is over. Let's see these acts be repealed, amended, and put forward that are actually going to do what you're saying. Like, you can say all these wonderful things. Oh, and on that same note, Carney's announcing all these projects. We don't have a budget. Speaking of Freeland, she resigned before the fall economic statement from Trudeau was going to come out because it was so bad. And economists are saying Carney's is going to be like twice as bad. Now we're seeing all these Liberal MPs resign. So it's like, okay, you promise all these great things, but you're going to put the country into debt to accomplish them. That doesn't seem so great, actually. So we'll see, because I think that's coming out on November 4th now. Yes. So that's not that far away. And I mean, this could be some sort of revolt that occurs if it's really as bad as people are saying it's going to be. But yeah, I mean, as for the polling here, like you said, Kris, I mean, first of all, he ran saying he'll be so good against Trump, and all we've seen from Carney is concessions. For example, outside of Kuzma, we had the 5th worst tariff rate in the world. Trump has no respect for Carney. He, in no way, shape, or form, did a good job of negotiating with Trump. In fact, Trump wouldn't even take his calls most of the time, as we saw. So kind of a let down there. If you really did only run on dealing with Trump, you have failed in that regard. So now if you're going to position yourself as pro-energy or whatever his new forte will become, let's say, then yeah, let's see it happen. Parliament's in session. You can put these bills forward. We're waiting. Instead, Sean Fraser, of course, is saying we're going to see the Online Harms Act come back, Bill C-63, despite every single group you could think of, civil liberties associations, free speech associations, saying, please don't do this. This is way beyond just destroying free speech. Our any rights we thought we had are going to be, I mean, we've seen with Bill 63, it was ridiculous. You could have been, what was it, $70,000 for thinking about committing a hate crime, and government associations determining what that even is. So, I mean, you could think of anything you've ever said online, and it was Pierre who quoted some things Trudeau said in the past, and he said, you're going to let Justin Trudeau be the arbiter of free speech, really? So hopefully, well, that is coming forward. Fraser said it only days ago, so we'll see. But I'm definitely itching to see what other parliamentary laws the Liberals announce here, because it's not looking good, in my opinion.
I will point out that the MNP research that is often asked, where it's like, how are you doing financially? Okay, so it's like it's a fiscal research group. Okay, and almost always around 50% of Canadians consistently say they're within $200 of not being able to make their basic bill payments every month. That means keeping the lights on. That means keeping like the repo man from taking your vehicle. Like, I'm not even joking. Usually when things are better, that number from my experience in journalism floats between 35 and 40%. It has been at the 50 mark, like consistently year after year after year in pretty much every region of Canada that I can see. And so again, I think it's on us all to speak for people who are struggling to keep their head above water right now. And so frankly, it's not surprising to me that cost of living is still close to the top. Walid, I wanted you to jump in here before we wrap things up.
Yeah, so absolutely. I've heard this number many times that 50% or more Canadians are $200 or less
Yeah.
to insolvency. So it's obviously a good reminder, if that's the condition of our country and our society, then that's time to look back at the pocketbook issues. Really, I think a lot of social issues, frankly, go on top of the pocketbook. It's the foundation of how we function. If people are, struggling to find work, struggling to pay the bills, then absolutely you're going to see a wave of people, very critical of the immigration regime we have today, bringing in a lot of people, subsidizing housing, subsidizing their costs, and taking in temporary foreign workers as well. I almost caught up with Mark Miller yesterday as well. I saw Mark Comencino circle around downtown Ottawa, tried to ask him a question. He wasn't really buying it, but Mark and him and I think one more member met up in a conversation. I was just watching from my side while I was editing my last article of the day. And I was really curious to speak to Mark, of course, because he oversaw the immigration file last under Trudeau. And, he probably oversaw a complete shift in the Canadian mentality towards immigration, right? I mean, this is the thing is, I think it's his tenure where you saw Canada go from a once super open, super liberal society when it comes to the issue of immigration to a country that, mirrors that of Australia and the UK, where you see frustrations are at record highs. Of course, I still think we're probably far behind Australia and far behind the United Kingdom in terms of the public sentiment, but we are definitely headed in that direction. And, again, you look at the data that you have at CTF and the data that we looked at in Juno and True North and published previously, I absolutely believe that the cost of living situation in Canada is what will drive our social cohesion perhaps to the ground, unfortunately. And again, tying it back to one of the issues we discussed earlier on today's show was the CBC. Well, I think the reason why there's such an issue with the CBC is, look, you'll hear abhorrent things, like I said about the Jimmy Kimmel situation, on all platforms from all kinds of people and all kinds of journalists or commentators.
Sure, pick where you want to listen to. You will hear something that you fundamentally disagree with. Yes.
When it comes to the CBC, it's like there's almost a tug of war fight. It's like, I want the CBC to rep more of my side or that side because, people are paying into it. So there is that kind of a user agreement there because, their tax dollars are going into it. And that's kind of where that battle is happening. If the CBC wasn't funded by the tune of $1.4 billion, and that doesn't, by the way, include additional funding that Carney announced to top on the CBC, that was, I think, something he said during the election, which Preston Manning said himself could raise some ethical concerns about the relationship between government, party, and, of course, institution. But all in all, I really do think that our pocketbooks, our fiscal balance sheet are what will take us to let's just say, a more challenging chapter in Canadian society and public sentiment on immigration, social cohesion, diversity, and other things that perhaps Trudeau has once campaigned and won elections off of.
I wanted to cheer you guys up a little tiny bit at the very end here as we say goodbye. As we're going into the budget, keep your ears cocked for especially folks who are within government. And all governments do this, okay? I'm not picking on them because they're liberals. The governments will typically say things, oh, well, there's nowhere to cut. Like, there's absolutely nowhere to cut. This will be austerity. We're going to be cutting, the porridge budget for orphans. Like, no, no. How about, exactly to your point, Walid, we can start with defund the CBC. There you go. You're saving at least $1.4 billion right off the top right there. And I have heard the Conservatives consistently say we need to defund the media, defund the CBC. So that's good to hear them say on this side of the election. They've kept saying it. So that's good. So defund the CBC. Get rid of all wasteful spending at things like Global Affairs Canada. Be able to do things like the Phoenix Pay System, which is their own payroll software, without blowing more than $1 billion. Get rid of the so-called gun buyback scheme, which is just already costing Canadian taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's only going to become a bigger boondoggle. And police say that it's not going to help anybody stay safer on the street. And then it's the little things. So the next time your sister-in-law comes over for Thanksgiving dinner, for example, and says, oh, well, there's nowhere to cut, you can say, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't be spending $20,000 to study the gender politics of Peruvian rock music. Maybe we shouldn't be spending $105,000 to document the life and times of a grocery cart. Like, those are real things. You people paid for it. All you people in Canada who are taxpayers, you paid for that stuff within their own departments. Okay, this is not governments funding podcasts, which I'm sure they do in some way, shape, or form anyway. Within their own departments, their little bureaucratic hearts, they have their own podcasts that like nobody listens to, that like Statistics Canada and like other departments, probably one of Roads and Bridges or something I've never heard of. They talk about, is outer space sexist? What? Why? Why are you asking this? So just trying to gently arm you with some information that when we're going into budget season, which we are in the middle of right now, my friends, the moment somebody says, oh, well, you're going to cut things to the bone, no. There's plenty of frivolous, silly stuff that we're blowing money on all the time that we can definitely cut to balance the budget. Guys, thank you both so much for your contributions. And I just want to encourage people, maybe take a page off the top of the show. Try to spend some time outside and away from our screens this weekend, and let's get back to balance. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, this has been Off the Record. Hey guys, thank you so much. I hope that wasn't too momish of me, all of my friendly advice.
No,
Thank you.
if anyone ever looks at the funding we've seen, I mean, there's an endless list, Kris. You gave 2 or 3 examples, but the list is really endless of insane, incomprehensible spending for government association. Absolutely, you could never reach the end. That's how many of these pet projects, let's call them, there are. I mean, it literally is an endless list.
It's overwhelming. Like I was trying to help go through some of them, even at the federal level. And I will point out, here in Alberta, they blow money on stupid stuff too, all the time. And I'm putting it in my budget report. It's more than $2 million a year that we're handing to individuals for arts projects. I'm not talking about cutting the budget for kids to go to choir camp or whatever through school. Okay. Like, I do have a heart. Okay.
Kris, I just remembered one.
What's that?
In Calgary, you could call the lake. Like, remember that one you guys
Call
did?
the river.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Insane.
Taxpayers spent money on that. We spent $15,000 to send a lady here from Lethbridge to South Korea so she could flop around on a lawn chair for 8 minutes and record herself. I'm not even joking. We spent $15,000 before that, sending her over to, I think it was the Czech Republic. And she set up her video camera again, same person. And she hid behind a big piece of paper for like 2 minutes. Like, if she wants to finance that herself or convince TELUS to give her money to go do that, like, fill your boots. Like, do it every day. Do not you dare try to take money from your neighbor to go do it, because that's what they're doing right now. And that's in Alberta. That is full on the provincial government's fault. So that's going in my budget report.
I can't wait to read it, Kris.
I'm looking forward to finishing it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your contributions today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kris. See you soon.
Bye-bye. Yep.